Ikatikwi. My name is Harmony. My ancestral name is Sitlakis. I'm from the Tla'amin Nation. And with my partner, Hannes, we have been working in service to the self-governing Indigenous governments to create the suite of community well-being applied data tools. And so we are going to talk about the conceptual well-being framework and the companion facilitation tool. Let me share my screen. So when you enter the site, we express gratitude for the self-governing Indigenous governments for doing this work in a good way, and we honor their intellectual property. And yeah, just grateful for the work that they've done to make these tools available to everyone. We then navigate to our applied tools menu, and you can see here we've bundled these tools together. This cute little arrow pointing up. These two tools are like, while all of these are nested within each other and kind of speak to each other as a whole, these two in particular are really kind of hand in hand. So this conceptual well-being framework is kind of like what do we mean when we talk about well-being? It outlines a set of domains, categories that are kind of the building blocks of well-being, recognizing that they are all in relationship with each other and all connect with each other. This was really developed through a shared process amongst the self-governing Indigenous governments that have been really like hand in hand with us in this work. Really important to recognize that like all of our governments have such diverse worldviews and such diverse knowledge systems and ways of thinking and knowing and being and existing and doing. And we want to honor that, and we don't want to create a single well-being framework as a cookie cutter that everybody's got to use. This is why the conceptual well-being framework and the facilitation tool are hand in hand. It's because we've created something at a high level, and we've created a tool to further customize and adapt that to each particular self-governing Indigenous government. At the same time, there is value in having a collective framework because we do share some common belief systems as Indigenous people, and we want to be in relationship with each other. We want to learn and grow together. We want to, at times, be able to compare. How are you doing? How are we doing? What are you doing over there? Like, that seems to be really working for you. What can we learn from that? And that's what, in some ways, a shared framework allows us to do. If we're all kind of working from this same root belief system, we can better collaborate, speak the same language, be sharing some of our emerging knowledge. A well-being framework can also just like allow us to understand the interconnected parts of a whole. And that's what this piece does. This is a very short tool, but it is the kind of like main organizing tool from which a number of other tools then cascade. So you'll see in some of the other videos and some of the other tools, like the indicator guide and the recommended indicator list, those are tied to these very same domains. The data visualization tool is tied to these domains. So this is kind of like the overarching umbrella for a number of the tools in this toolkit. So when we look at the conceptual well-being framework tool, here it is. And again, this is really developed through a process of the self-governing Indigenous governments collectively coming together to kind of lend their worldviews and to say, where do we have commonalities, and to sift that out. So we went through a very active process of doing this as a team. So this visual is very reminiscent of a dream catcher, was what the working group asked us to consider. It shows that all of these things are connected by these interconnected lines, that, you know, leadership and governance is so tied to management of the land, stewardship, and environment. And that is completely tied to our health and well-being. And it is inextricable from our culture and our identity. And all of that comes together. And those are all contributing factors to community well-being. And so we have community well-being at the center is really like the critical core. It is not just the culmination of all of those other domains that you see, but it also has its own set of subdomains that really express the heart of well-being for us. And then we have 6 domains around the outside: culture, language, and identity. Who are we as people? What makes us unique in our worldview? Leadership and governance. How are we governed? Like, what are the processes of governance, past, present, future? Infrastructure, program services. These are the things that we are running, the services we are delivering, the buildings that we're building, the roads that we're driving on. Land stewardship and environment. This is our air, our land, our waters. Education, capacity, and employment. I think about this as livelihood. How are we making a livelihood as people and communities? And then health. So what is our state of physical, emotional, social, spiritual well-being? That's the core of it. And then external elements. We recognize, particularly us, Indigenous peoples, have a shared experience of interference in our well-being through the imposition of colonialism and the continuing realities of racism. And so that is not in their circle of well-being. Those are external factors that do interfere with our well-being, and we need to understand and continue to illuminate and shine a light on those realities in order to support whole system change. So that is the overall community well-being framework. For each of those domains that I just described, there is like a nice paragraph defining that domain at a high level and describing the subdomains in each one. So this is important when we think about this tool relative to the next tool, which is the indicator guide and recommended indicator list, because we have then indicators tied to each of these subdomains. So the definition is inclusive of both the paragraph and these bullet points. And you can see how much we care about in some of these areas. Like it's been hard to describe things in a single title. And so having some of these keywords really important. So when we think about culture, heritage, language, identity, this refers to fundamentally the heart of who we are as a people, honoring our ancestral belief systems, understanding the importance of those belief systems in who we are today and us feeling well and feeling that we belong. And all of that supports a sense of health, well-being, resilience. And so all of these subdomains are all things that we care about and we may want to measure and monitor as self-governing Indigenous governments. I should note that some of these subdomains are definitely repeated in other domains, because this isn't about parsing off and creating silos. This is about creating themes, but understanding the interconnection of those themes. So things like access and connection to land, they show up not just here, but in the land and stewardship domain as well. Belonging, ceremony, our like civic pride and engagement in community, elders, healing. So healing, of course, shows up here and in health. Language, medicines, our spirituality and our spiritual beliefs, the degree to which we are involved in processes of learning and transmitting tradition and culture, and traditional foods, which obviously shows up in other domains too. So for each of these, there is the same repeating pattern that gives you a sense of each domain. And then there's a set of tools for how to adapt this framework. And this provides a few options that is intended to meet SGIGs exactly where they're at. So one is, some may look at this and say, we want to use this exactly as it is. And this is hopefully the case for many, because we developed this together. So it has some validity, some work, some buy-in already from many people who have been involved in this work. So So no problem at all in lifting this and saying, we're going to use this framework as it is. In which case, great, go forward, use the indicator guide, which is the next tool in the toolbox. Some may want to just use a subset of domains. It's like, we're really interested in how we're doing in culture, heritage, language, identity. We want to start there. Or the cultural department has a project and they just want to focus in that one area. This isn't a whole of government effort. Totally fine. You customize the domain names. So for some of these, like for my people, the community well-being domain in the middle, we'd probably retitle to Ta'ao, which is just like who we are, our teachings, our ancestral beliefs as Tla'amin people. We would put that in the middle, for example, so we can customize the domain names. We can also take that list of subdomains and say which ones are relevant to us. Like maybe that whole big long list that we just walked through in culture and language isn't relevant to every single government. So, you know, take a smaller list, pull some smaller subdomains. We can revisualize using these domains. So we've presented them in this circular form, which is very common and really resonated with the group that developed this. There's also other ways to do it. When we workshopped this and did this as a team, each table came up with a different visual metaphor. Many used circles, but some used the concept of a tree to identify what are the roots of well-being relative to the outcomes. So this can be a good exercise to do with a group to really get some good buy-in into the community well-being framework. And we've also provided a tool to do so. So the other companion tool to this one is a facilitation tool. This was not one of the original tools we thought we would develop, but we did develop this after we did an exercise as a team to design the community well-being framework. We designed a large exercise that a whole big group of us went through over the space of 2 days. And so we have described that process in this tool for any SGIGs that are interested in adapting the community well-being framework, or if they want to start from scratch, they can completely start from scratch. So in this, we've provided some, like, how would you go about designing a workshop? Who should be involved? How do you summarize and report the results? How do you manage when some people are online? Some people might be in person. Do we do this as a big group? Do we do this as small breakouts? So this provides really practical guidance to all of that. And then there's some real step-by-step instructions, and we've given you downloads. You can click a download where there are like individual cards for each of the subdomains that are part of the overall community well-being domain. All of those bullet points we talked through, which are really drawn from a huge literature review that we did in this work. And so we give you the step-by-step guidance on how to go about designing a workshop with all of these like printouts and step-by-step things. How did you kind of go about grouping themes? And then how do you take results and come up with your own community well-being framework? And we give some examples of some other frameworks that exist. So between these two tools, people have, I think, what they need to either get started with a total community well-being framework from which they can design and use the indicator tool. So do measurement, do surveys, report on results, support planning, as well as a tool to adapt that framework if they wish to suit their own needs and realities.